Hello, fellow food lovers. Today I will be making Chinese battered king oyster mushrooms with dried scallop sauce. You will need about a half pound or 8 ounces of king oyster mushrooms, fresh, 10 dried scallops, 1 tablespoon oyster sauce, 1 tablespoon soy sauce, 1 teaspoon sugar, 1 teaspoon sesame oil, 1 teaspoon chicken powder, and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. For the batter, you'll need 1 cup of white flour, half a cup of cornstarch, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, a quarter teaspoon of salt, and about a cup of water. You may need an additional quarter cup more. Okay, so these are king oyster mushrooms. They don't look at all like oyster mushrooms. They look like huge button mushrooms with long stems, basically. So these ones I bought, they look like they have part of the roots still on them. I don't think that part's really edible or really clean, so I'm going to cut the root part off and just have the mushroom to use like that. Yeah, so I'll cut the root part off on all 3 of them. So these mushrooms have kind of a meaty taste to them. Some people say they taste like maybe scallops or seafood or something like that. So I'm going to slice each mushroom into really thick slices, so probably about 4 slices each. Okay, so I did that with all 3 mushrooms. And those are the dried scallops. There's about 10 of them. I soaked them overnight so that they reconstitute. I drain the water. And then I'm going to break them up. They're going to make the sauce. So I'll give the sauce a nice scallopy, seafoody type flavor. A lot of times, dried scallops are used as a flavoring ingredient more than as a food item. So a lot of times they'll end up in a sauce or in a soup or something like that. Sometimes people will put them into like the sticky rice dumplings, the ones that are wrapped in bamboo leaves. Okay, so I'm going to make the batter now. So I'm going to add a cup of flour, all white flour. I'm going to add half a cup of cornstarch. I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And I'm going to add a quarter teaspoon of salt for flavoring. Okay, to that I'm going to add 1 cup of water. I'm going to start with 1 cup. You want a really thick batter when you're frying items like mushrooms and anything else. So basically what you want to start with is make it into a really stiff paste and then add a little bit of water at a time until you get a batter, like a really thick batter. If you add too much water at the beginning, you might get a really thin batter, and that would be a problem because it won't stick to the mushrooms. Okay, add another quarter cup of water, and I'm stirring that. So it's now a batter. It's a very thick batter, which is basically what you want. So I usually will require for this recipe 1.25 cup of water, but I'll start with a cup of water first, just in case for some reason it just makes batter right from the get-go. Okay, so I have a wok half filled with oil. It's been on high heat for about 5 minutes. So the way the Chinese would test the temperature of the oil is to dip a wooden chopstick into the oil, and if it bubbles like that, then it's hot enough to deep fry with. Okay, so here's the batter. I'm going to give it a quick stir before we get started. And here's the oyster mushrooms. So I'm going to put the mushroom into the batter, dip both sides so it's well covered, and then gently drop it into the oil. So with this size wok, maybe it'll fit about 4 slices of oyster mushrooms or king oyster mushrooms at a time. So I put a plate behind the wok with a couple of paper towels on it that I'm going to put the mushrooms on after they're done deep frying. You can even serve these battered mushrooms on their own with a bit of salt on them instead of having a sauce. But the sauce really goes well with these mushrooms, the dried oyster sauce. Sorry, the dried scallop sauce. So you're going to fry these on one side until they're kind of golden brown. Then you're going to flip them over and fry the other side. So probably about 3 to 4 minutes on each side, and then you're going to remove them. So we're going to do that with about 4 more pieces. So again, probably fry 3 to 4 minutes on each side. So once it's golden brown, you flip it over and fry the other side. So with 3 mushrooms, we'll probably do 3 batches. Okay, so I finished off the rest of the mushrooms. So I drained the oil. I usually save the oil for using for a later date for deep frying in the wok as well. And So I drained the oil, I washed the wok, it's on high heat, so I'm going to make the sauce now. So I added a cup of water into a hot wok, and then I added all the dried scallops that have been broken up. So for the dried scallops, to make a really good sauce, you need to boil the dried scallops in water for at least 5 minutes, just to infuse the flavor into the sauce. So I just added a tablespoon of oyster sauce and a tablespoon of soy sauce. And a teaspoon of sugar. A teaspoon of chicken powder. And a teaspoon of sesame oil. Yeah, so give it a good boil. You want to boil at least 5 minutes. Okay, so we'll make a cornstarch slurry to thicken the sauce up with. So I'm going to put 1 heaping tablespoon of cornstarch into a bowl. So I'm putting out, 3 little tablespoons, I guess. So that's 1 heaping tablespoon total. I'm going to add a quarter cup of water to that. I'm going to stir it, make sure the cornstarch is well mixed into the water. Okay, so while the sauce is boiling, I'm going to transfer the king oyster mushrooms onto a serving plate. Okay, so we're going to thicken the sauce now. So I'm adding the cornstarch slurry into the sauce. Give that a stir. Okay, so we're going to pour the sauce or ladle sauce over the mushrooms. Make sure all the mushrooms are covered by the sauce. Doesn't it look tasty? Okay, so there you have it. That's battered king oyster mushrooms with dried scallop sauce. You get great to eat with rice with the sauce. Okay, bon appetit.